Hi, I'm Jake Delhomme, quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. Leading my team to the Super Bowl was the most exciting moment in my career, but it doesn't compare to the time I've spent throwing the ball with my cousin Kevin. Join me and thousands of other Civitan members who volunteer at fundraisers, summer camps, and Special Olympic Games. To volunteer, contact your local Civitan club today or visit us on the web at civitan.org. Together, we can score a touchdown in your community.
Hello, my name is Keith Thompson. I'm president of Asheville Civitan Club this year. I'd like to invite each and every one of you to join us for the upcoming television series, Spirit of Civitan TV. It's going to be on URTV, and we're going to be covering some of the important issues affecting our community. We're going to be meeting some of the civic leaders who are making a difference every day in the lives of our community and making things better for our children and grandchildren, making this a better place in which to live. So we hope you will be able to join us and watch our series as it comes forward. Thank you.
The Western North Carolina Film Commission has been in existence since 93 or 94. It started out as the division of the Chamber of Commerce, and then when Advantage West was created 11 years ago, it was absorbed into Advantage West, which is a regional economic development agency. There's 7 of them in the state. And in North Carolina, there are 4 regional film commissions, 4 very active regional film commissions. And we work with the state office out of Raleigh. So there's one in Wilmington, one in Charlotte, Piedmont Triad, and Western North Carolina, which is 10,000 square miles and 23 counties. The division of kind of the territories. And that yellow part on the left, which is us, that's about 10,000 square miles, about the size of Maryland. There's been a lot of filming in the state over the years, over the last 12-year decade. And really, when you track film production all over the country, it's a lot like manufacturing. So I'm going to give you a little background into the history and how we arrived to where we are today. There was a period of time in the early 90s that it was really active in North Carolina. And what inspired that was, do you all remember a producer named Dino De Laurentiis? So he started in Wilmington. He took over some warehouses and started a film production studio there in the 80s. And I think he had a 7-picture deal. And he shot all those movies in Wilmington. And that attracted and trained a crew base that has remained to this day. That there's a real, they've built up an infrastructure from there. He eventually went bankrupt, but I mean, at that point, he's still around and making movies, but he left. And another company came in called Carolco, who did Terminator and some other Total Recall. They went bankrupt, but this is every few years. And then a company called EUE Screen Gems bought the stages, and that's who owns them today. EUE Screen Gems produces a lot of, I think it's The Guiding Light and a lot of television commercials. But what was left was a really good infrastructure of crew, and that always attracted Hollywood to come because that's a cost savings. North Carolina is a right-to-work state from a labor standpoint, but in film production, the union pretty much supersedes that now. So that early on, that was an attractive point for North Carolina, but now you really can't shoot anything of any significance unless it's a union job. So those were some factors. Then in the 90s, about the mid-90s, as the dollar got really, really strong, Hollywood discovered, not for the first time, but the rest of the world, Canada. You just go over the border and you'd save 30% right off the top on the value of the dollar. On top of that, in Canada, they had incentives, aggressive incentives, maybe 15% on your payroll. Different regions would have different percentages on what you film. So in Vancouver and in Toronto, they built up an enormous infrastructure, and $4 billion, I think, a year in Vancouver. Huge. Then the dollar weakened. 2002, right? And what happened in the U.S., there was a lot of feeling, too, of runaway production. There was some sentiment toward, we need to shoot domestically. There was a huge backlash, actually, to Cold Mountain, which I think is interesting. People were really upset, and I think it's because it was a Civil War story, and they felt that's sort of proprietary, that should not have been shot in Romania. The producers of that film, this was before I was here, spent a lot of time in Western North Carolina looking and trying to figure out a way that they could shoot it here, but it didn't work for them. They needed snow. They got an army in Romania. They got all this stuff that we couldn't offer them at that point in time. But as the dollar weakened, there was more production coming in the United States, and states started to offer film incentives. And that's where we are at today. 5 years ago, there were no film incentives. The first state that did it was Louisiana, and this predates Katrina. And they were wildly aggressive incentives. They were 25% rebate on the total budget of a film, no matter what you shot in Louisiana. And you got it up front. They brokered it. It was an investment tax credit. So banks or insurance companies or oil and gas companies would buy it. It was kind of high finance stuff. And then the production company would get a great big check before they started shooting. So they got a huge amount of attention. Today, Louisiana does $600 million a year in film production. New Mexico is another one. Theirs weren't quite as wildly aggressive, but very thorough and complete. And today there are 34 states with film incentives. North Carolina has them. Ours are a 15% refundable tax credit based on in-state spending. They have to spend $250,000. And it's not a brokered tax credit, which is better for the production companies. It's part of our tax code. It's not, this is all the technical stuff because everything's compared state to state to state. Ours are possibly more sustainable, I hope, than many, many of the other states. Louisiana has backed theirs, backed up a little. I think theirs are now 30% on what they spend in the state, but their view was kind of a lost leadership role. So it's an incredibly aggressive arena now. And what happens is everything's monetized. Every piece of that legislation is monetized. It's high finance by Hollywood, and they just figure out where the dollar is going to go the farthest. So what happens in North Carolina is the bulk of the work goes to Wilmington, because when they run that equation, if they have enough crew that they don't have to put in hotels and feed them, you know, crew that they bring from California or New York or wherever, that bottom line number works out for them. So North Carolina last year, I don't have the statistics at the end of the year, but I don't think that much shot, actually. But last year, these were a number of films that were shot in the state, and they were big ones. Leatherheads did more in South Carolina. That's a George Clooney movie coming out. It's a 1920s football movie. Bolden was, this is an oxymoron, an $80 million independent feature. That's an interesting one. That's about a jazz guy. And all the rest of those were shot in Wilmington. So a lot of the work has been, you know, just, it's hard to compete because it is only about incentives. Creative considerations, which used to really drive some of the film production that came through Western North Carolina, have taken a back seat. I think if there's an Appalachian story, it might fall to the wayside if there's a story set in a bayou, because then they figure out, oh, we can finance that. We can make that really inexpensive. 3 years ago, when I had started it, or I guess I've been at the Film Commission 4 years almost, I would talk to producers who said, I don't chase incentives. I talk to those same producers today. They can't make a movie unless there are incentives. They have to go where there are incentives. They won't get financing. So that's the big Hollywood stuff. Oh, this was just to kind of talk about our great area, and that 60% of our area is protected land, which will always, something will come up. Eventually these Appalachian stories or other stories that need this kind of landscape, which is, I think, irreplaceable in the United States, they'll rise to the top. They're around. I have confidence that, you know, we'll get some of this work. Did you know we were just named happiest city? Did everyone read that in the New York? There's a writer, and now I wish I remembered his name, and it was in the New York Times Magazine, that Asheville is one of the happiest cities in the country. This slide, I just want to give you a little background of the company I do work for, because out of all these regional economic development agencies, Advantage West has a pretty diversified group of initiatives. So there's an entrepreneurial council, and we have a certified entrepreneurial program, an angel investor network, and Blue Ridge Food Ventures, where Caroline Allred works out of, who did the catering today. It's a place for people who are small food producers who can't invest into a commercial kitchen. And one of the focuses on the Film Commission side is, and it's going to be a much more local focus like all of these initiatives, it's a two-pronged effort that we have with the Film Commission. There's the Hollywood part, which is big, and it's about legislation and incentives, right? But really what we're gonna work on is growing our own indigenous base of filmmakers. And not just film. I mean, film is becoming really an outdated term. All sorts of, however you express yourself visually, which today really is digital. There's so, technology has allowed everyone, the great equalizer, to have access to equipment, to have access to the tools to make a movie. Whereas 5 years ago, there were certain pieces of equipment you would have to be in California or New York or for editing. Now you can edit on this. You could, on this little laptop in your bathroom if you wanted. You can make a movie. Anyone can make a movie. And kind of more importantly, with the tool of the internet as it gains in even further, penetrates every aspect of our life, I think all businesses, so much is going to be driven by expressing yourself visually. So much will be communicated visually. So everyone really is going to start learning all of these tools, separate from entertainment, but just to survive in the business world. All of the tools for videotaping and editing and marketing yourself, that it's going to become more and more important to understand that technology going forward. Asheville has a lot of really good things going on that I think from the bottom up, the ground up, will start supporting this kind of industry here. And I think we're unusual compared to a lot of other towns and cities in the country that from a film commission standpoint, I get to meet a lot of other people who represent their towns, and they don't have these kind of efforts going on. 48-Hour Film Project is a national film festival where it started in Washington, D.C., and they're all over the world. When we joined we're one of the sponsors, the Film Commission is, 3 years ago. Asheville is the smallest town to be in this festival. I think we're now about the 4th or 5th smallest. But you have to write, you have to create a movie in 2 days, and you can't go in prepared because you choose the genre, you choose a character name, you choose a prop, so it all has to be written and shot, edited, scored, original music in 2 days. It's a very exciting festival. But what was so interesting about it in Asheville for the last couple of years, last summer we had 42 teams. Philadelphia had 40. Philadelphia is, I don't know how many, a million something, like Philadelphia City. Same with Baltimore. Baltimore had something like 42 teams. We had 42 teams. There's so much creativity in this town. And I think UNCA has got a really great digital media program. We have the Media Arts Project, which we'll get to in a minute. And URTV, which is helping people get the training they're going to need to kind of enter into this next phase of our economy, which I think, again, it's going to be more and more important to express ourselves visually. URTV, as this public access station, is a great outlet for so much information, not just municipal, but also creative. And they offer these classes and these producer classes, all of which is the beginning of building this ground-up infrastructure for Asheville to excel in this world. Asheville Film Commission is a volunteer city commission. I'm on that board. And it's focused on Asheville. It's to make Asheville a film-friendly city, have good permits, easy to shoot in. And also we're developing this Western North Carolina Seeds program, which would be a grant program, a goods and services, kind of a coupon grant program for small independent filmmakers, the little guy. The Media Arts Project is a really incredible organization, new media. I actually had the hardest time when I first started because I was so not technically oriented. And now I understand digital technology to a certain degree, but also the importance of what media art means, which is so broad, right? It's all sorts of media, all sorts of ways you digest information, and it's about this expressing yourself visually. All that technology that allows you to express, allows that image to come onto the screen. So there are web designers, there are filmmakers, there are artists who build sculptures on their computers. It's fascinating, the breadth and depth of the kind of individual who would be a media artist. And the Media Arts program, or project, does exhibition, education and training, networking events. And one of the more interesting things is the collaboration they do with Applied Visualization Lab. And I'm going to show you a little film that they did with weather information. They work with NOAA, and Asheville is the center for all this weather information. Nationally or internationally in the federal building, and their various entities that work together with all this scientific data and an effort with some members from the Media Arts Project, some real innovators. We're trying to help them get the information out in a way that is understandable and help legislators or educators understand what this information means. And seeing things visually, it pushes everything forward faster and makes it enhances your ability to understand information. So if you have scientists plus media artists equals understanding is what that is about. And it's fascinating about how very complicated scientific information becomes illuminated through certain types of film or visual imagery. But I'll get to that slide in a few minutes. One of the things that the Film Commission does, and again, this is for us trying to develop this ground up infrastructure, is we have the Media Arts Advantage Fund. We partnered with the Media Arts Project, and it's a grant program that the Film Commission started and partnered with the MAP that gives small cash grants to true art grants. You know, they don't have to match them. They just go make what it is they need to make. So it's for various media artists, not just filmmakers. We kind of copied a grant program in Austin, Texas. I went to a film festival that I go to every year called South by Southwest in Austin. Austin is an interesting city. They have developed their own film and media industry. Granted, they got the University of Texas, Austin, which is an incredible school, but they have an enormous amount of creative people. And it is kind of similar to Asheville on a much larger scale. I mean, it's the capital, so they have things we'd never have. But it's this very creative city and kind of enclave within probably, an area that might, or a state that the rest of it isn't known as much for the creativity. And I think it draws people from all over. And Austin has done that. And music is huge. And music is really big in Asheville. We have a music industry here. It's growing all the time and attracting people from all over the country and then developing our own musicians here. So this was really exciting, even though they're small grants. And there is a filmmaker in town, Chris Bauer, and he made a science fiction film. It's called Moon Europa, and he got a small grant from us. It was just a few $1,000s. And Chris and his producers, they spent 3 years just, filming what they could. He built these sets in their garage, in his living room. They shot when they could. It was kind of a community-based experience. Everybody helped out and worked with him as he, could get the money or as he went along. And that film was chosen by the Independent Film Project in New York City for this rough cut lab. The IFP, Independent Film Project, is a really big deal for independent filmmakers. And they brought him up there in May. They reviewed their film. They gave him pointers. They came back. They edited some more. And then they went up in September during this conference and film festival, showed it. They got mentors. They've got connections. It was really a big deal. And we were really excited and proud of him. And he's like the epitome of the independent filmmaker. John mentioned that there was a film that went to Sundance. It's called Anywhere USA, and it was called Asheville the Movie. There's an individual from Asheville. It's another film like Moon Europa, but on a larger scale. But it took him 3 years. His name is Anthony Chusey Jardine, and he spent the last 4 years making this movie. Didn't follow any of the rules. Raised his money here, and had no actors that are in the Screen Actors Guild except his daughter. Got into Sundance, one of the 12 narrative features chosen out of 1,300 films from all over the country. It's just amazing. And that film went to Sundance. So we have the beginning, and they're being recognized, of some really good filmmakers that we hope will develop and stay here and make films. And that's what Austin has. They have Robert Rodriguez, who did a bunch of films like Spy Kids and El Mariachi and some, I don't know if you'll recognize any of those, but he's kind of a big deal. And he shoots them, edits them, everything. He does them all in Austin. And they've really cultivated. There's another guy named Richard Linklater, who's very well known in the independent film world and has made a number of films. And Terrence Malick, and they're all in Austin, Texas. And Asheville, it's a totally achievable goal that if we cultivate our own talent, that we can have an entertainment industry here. Because going forward, one thing that I am looking forward to as technology expands, as the use of the internet expands, and the way films and any kind of media is distributed, it's breaking down. Like the music industry is in terrible shape. They're in the big labels of the music industry compared to, let's say, movies. Movies are going to be a little later. they can't launch any new big, it's hard to launch big stars. It's just, it's all in disarray because people are they're finding music themselves. They're finding it on the web. They're figuring it out through different groups, entities that are represented on the web. Big music can't sway the individual. And all these kids who are coming up, my 9 and 11-year-olds, for instance, they find their own music. They find their own media. They find groups that are just like them, kids in Korea, whatever it is they're into, that they're all into, they're all together in it. And what will happen probably is that there will be different ways to experience media, not just the tight hold that certain studios have on movies in the movie theaters, on the cinemas. People will start being able to download it. You'll be able to watch it in your home. It's just going to change. And that's exciting because what that means is that artists all over the country or world will have a place to put their film where people can see it, or their show, or whatever it might be. We won't be tied to the 2-hour format of a feature film. And I think that's really, really exciting. And I hope in 5 years we start to realize that. Because I just got back from Sundance. I meant to bring the book. It's this thick. I go to South by Southwest in 3 weeks. It's that thick. There's so many movies. And you read about them and you want to see every single one of them. And you think, where am I going to ever see these? How will I ever see all this incredible work? I had some filmmakers come from Belgium recently who do short films. And they were asking about financing because there's financing all over Europe, everywhere for all sorts of film projects. And I had to explain, there's no public financing for films or these kinds of projects. And there really isn't any outlet for short films. And they have channels devoted to short films. And I think all sorts of people would love to have a channel, a website devoted to short films. And I just think it's just a matter of time before we'll have access to a lot of the great creative work that's out there. Because a lot is being made. It's almost like there's a pile of it growing, and we're just figuring out how to get it to, people are figuring out how to get it to you and everyone else. So I think that's exciting. And I think that's why it's very important to build our own indigenous creative workforce. Not just for entertainment, but for information as well. This I wanted to show because this takes the technology of animation, filmmaking, and then what they did, this is the artists working with the NEMAC and WNC, those are more of the acronyms, and actually I can never remember what they all stand for the weather, the groups that gather all the weather information, and NOAA. And they did a model, an animated flood model for Buncombe County. So this is the same movie-making technology that you all see in theaters, and this is a simulation. No. But they created, this is Asheville. That orange are all the impervious surfaces, that's parking lots, any kind of cement, pavement, to show what would happen if there was a flood the next time, like the one we had in 03. 03? 04. It's very powerful, though, the ability to animate this kind of information. And it helps plan. Yeah. And if you go to any of these websites, if you went to the website for NEMAC, it will take you to different applied visualizations. So there's a lot of usage for this kind of creative technology that could be very powerful in all sorts of industries. It's not just for entertainment. We're cultivating what the Film Commission is going to do. We're going to build up our strategy and funding for more grants for local media artists going forward, and really develop and support our entrepreneurial culture. With the Film Commission, it's going to be these creative individuals who can take this technology and express themselves visually. There's one more thing I have to talk about, and I needed to put in a slide. Another big initiative we have is a really great festival that it's a group of individuals in Grove Park Inn and the Media Arts Project called Hatch Fest, and it's a festival for visual arts, film, architecture, digital media, fashion and design, and there's dance and creative writing. And it's in Bozeman, Montana, and we're going to have the East Coast version in Asheville starting in April of next year. And it's for students in those disciplines, but it brings in everyone who has any interest in any of these. There's a variety of panels and seminars. When I was in Bozeman, I saw people of every single age group at these different panels. I mean, Bozeman's another very creative little city. So that's an exciting thing to look forward to. And if anyone is interested in Hatch Fest or getting involved in something, if you have any area of expertise, there is AshevilleHatchFest.org.
Would I be correct in assuming that other Asheville's all around the country are developing comparable programs, in which case it becomes a highly competitive industry. And if that's true, what are the peculiarities of Asheville that make it distinctive against the competition?
From the entertainment standpoint, and this is my theory, you know, the U.S. has an enormous economy, right? And if that hold from the entertainment side loosens up, so I heard a statistic that a blockbuster, 3% of the population participates in a blockbuster. I don't know how that's right, though, because 3% of 206 million, a blockbuster is 100 million. No, maybe right. Okay, so 3%. That's it, 3%. So what the internet as a tool allows you to do, and I'm going to get to your question, is find those audiences that are into whatever your story is. You need that audience. And once you identify that audience, and that's the hard part, there are ways to get to them. And the internet will allow filmmakers, let's just focus on filmmakers, to show their piece of work to that audience. And I think that audience is huge, that other 97%.
I would like to know, what do you do? What's your job?
On the Hollywood stuff, on that end, and it's really for any filmmaker, but we have a location management database, which is all digital, and it's about locations. That's the history of film commissions. It was all about locations. What's come in the fold is this incentive end. So there's now a little more legislative work and that kind of thing. So I keep that database up. I do location scouting. We have a resource directory of our crew base here that's online. So there's that piece of my work, and I do a lot of marketing on my own, and I do a lot of marketing with the state of North Carolina. The Department of Commerce has the film office, and they send leads to us. We can develop our own leads, but I work with them as well. So there's that piece. Then I'm involved in this Media Arts Advantage Fund, involved in these other efforts like with Hatchfest, going to a meeting right after here, our plan of action to raise a bunch of money, and then, you know, all these various other initiatives we've gotten ourselves in that we hope will raise the profile of our media, our, you know, various artists here.
Just a quick follow-up. Is there any? I'm on, you know, the typical television system. I don't know how I could get any chance to view local productions or regional productions on my television set. How about that?
Right. The films that I cited here, they're the one that went to Sundance. Maybe they'll have a screening in Asheville, but I'm not sure when they'll do that. The other one, the science fiction film, I mean, I imagine they would have a screening here at some point, but if they it's all about distribution and getting picked up. And so I don't know when you'll be able to see those or see other work from here. That's a piece of the puzzle that has to really develop.
Well, Mary, thank you very much. We enjoyed it a great deal, and good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, one last thought. Now, you all remember what you're going to do with the finger hugs.